Thank you very much. And Seema and I have never done a double act before, but for some reason over the next few weeks we're doing a couple more. And Seema suggested at lunchtime that we're turning into Mick Fleetwood and Samantha Fox, if any of you remember that. I'll leave you to decide which one's which, though. I'm Director of Housing, Corporate Director of Housing and Adult Social Services, and a lot of our concerns at the moment at any level in public services, how we're going to deal with the future, because we know what we're not dealing with is a recession. What we're dealing with is a sustained drop in public spending, which estimations as to how severe that is going to be vary, but we do know it's going to be severe. We know that expectations are high. We're coming in to this round of elections on the back of a period of very high, it didn't maybe feel like it, but very high levels of investment in public spending, and also high levels of improvement in service industries generally, not necessarily just public services. So public expectations are very high, but the money is very tight. And then we have this sort of thing in my social services role I find very hard to reconcile, and I don't think there is an easy answer for it. It's that reconciling the move towards personalisation in public services, in health, in social care particularly perhaps, but it's sweeping round, and the need to build communities. A lot of what you might think of as the root causes of reliance on the state are actually symptoms of communities that don't work. So how much do we spend on public services because of isolation and loneliness? How much do we spend on public services because we don't handle transitions between childhood and adulthood well, or people coming out of prison, or people leaving university, or people suddenly becoming disabled, or people retiring? So those sorts of things, those sorts of questions, quite hard to resolve. But I think that anybody who's concerned about building a livable city has to address those sorts of issues. And here's an example from Islington. Is state intervention, is state provision always a good thing? This is the Market Estate in Islington. I'm pleased to say this block has been knocked down. And I used to think it was fairly random graffiti, but since Lord Mostyn's presentation, I realized what it was an alfresco seminar in urban planning, which perhaps we ought to have preserved. It might have been more useful than whatever strategy documents were produced shortly before this monstrous estate went up. One of the questions that we have to ask ourselves in dealing with the new environment in public service is, how do we get people out there to do more for themselves and each other? Whatever people might say in public service, and I've been around in public service for a long time, we are concerned mainly in public service in how we do things for people. That's our job as we see it. Well, it isn't anymore. Probably never should have been. And we need to think about how we get people to do more for themselves and each other, and that would make a much more livable city. Issues for us in Islington are about healthy lifestyles, and I don't just mean your 5 a day of whatever we're supposed to have 5 a day of, but employment, learning, having something worthwhile to do. Those are really strongly associated with much healthier lifestyles which are much less expensive on the state. Overcrowding and child poverty are huge issues for us, and very strongly linked. Cross-generation cohesion, if you like. We do have a lot of talk about community cohesion between different people with different ethnic backgrounds, different waves of immigration and so on. But the thing that strikes me as being probably the most difficult or the most serious problem in Islington is the lack of cross-generation cohesion and the lack of respect between generations for each other. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of work, national work, done on the link between tenure and outcomes for people in terms of their getting out and getting on. People who live in social tenancies much less likely to live to a grand old age, much less likely to go to university, much less likely to grow up and get good jobs. And that's got worse over time. Like a lot of people in my generation, I say, I was brought up in council housing, it didn't do me any harm. Well, there's a lot of study to show that people born when I was born in the late 50s, early 60s, it didn't do them any harm. But people born in the late 60s, late 70s in council housing and later find that their life chances are very much diminished. And that's tenure rather than buildings. Because in Islington, we have a lot of council properties that have been sold into owner occupation. We have a lot of Victorian street properties, which are now council properties. But you still see the link between the tenure and the building. And loneliness, isolation. I think if we totted up how much the loneliness and isolation is costing us, even if we had no ethical reason for addressing this, even if we weren't thinking on a human level, that it's outrageous that there's over 500,000 people in London who only see one other person in a week. The cost of it in mental health services and day centres and all the rest of it is gross. So how much does loneliness cost? Here we are back at the Market Estate, and it's a pity this picture isn't taken from, it doesn't pan back a little bit, because I think, and I wouldn't be an expert, I did say when I was asked to come and speak here, I'm not an expert in urban design by any means. I've got about as far as you can go in a housing career, and I only know one thing, and that's the famous Wilt test. Would I live there? And if the answer is yes, then that's fine, and if the answer is no, you do something about it. And the answer to this Wilt test is, I wouldn't live there. But somebody's obviously made an honest attempt to have some sort of space in the centre of this estate where people will congregate, and as you can see, they're not very likely to. So what sort of community do we want to have? And that does sound a little bit sort of dirigiste. It sounds a little bit imposing, a view from on high, me and my ivory tower, if you can call it that. If you'd seen my office, you'd see that was not quite the situation. But why should people like me be deciding what sort of community do we want to have? Well, I don't think we should. I think we should be having quite serious conversations with people who live in that community about the sort of community we want to have. This is a picture of how the Packington estate in Islington will look. It's currently being rebuilt. It's a large panel steel estate which didn't meet safety requirements and had to come down. Just on the right of the picture, behind that cyclist, is what was Islington Green School, the school that famously wasn't good enough for Tony Blair's children, and is now rebuilt as an academy, or being rebuilt as an academy. And this is a lot of the detail that's filled in with the people going about their business very happily, is trying to give an impression of the sort of community that we hope some of this rebuilding will lead to. But rebuilding by itself, as we know from experience, from bitter experience in some cases, isn't enough. The housing context over the coming period is going to be a difficult one. We know that with money being tight, that we're going to enter into what will probably be quite a long period of low levels of investment in the stock, after having had high levels, provided you jumped through the sorts of hoops that Emma was talking about, and provided you didn't do anything sensible like think about the whole place and how to improve it, but you only spent it on windows and kitchens and bathrooms that were over a certain age. But we did do a lot of work. We have been doing a lot of work. We're continuing to do that in improving our stock, but that will run out.